Okay, welcome tonight, everybody. I hope everybody's well. I heard the sun peeked out a little bit earlier, but I didn't see it. It's been a very gray week. So hopefully it'll get a little bit brighter, maybe tomorrow. But welcome. Glad everybody could make it tonight. I look forward to being able to see everybody in person again someday, who knows when. But for those of you who aren't familiar with MEFA, we're a nonprofit state authority. We're a quasi-state authority, so we are self-financing. We were created back in 1982 to help families plan, save, and pay for college. And we do a lot of outreach and guidance for families, webinars like this one. Since the pandemic started, we've taken everything virtually. We do tons of webinars and blogs and email curriculum. We just started an Instagram page. And so we have lots of resources beyond tonight to help you. So please take advantage of all the free resources that MEFA has. And tonight, if you do have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, but just type those in the Q&A and we'll get started. So here's what we're going to talk about tonight. The types and sources of financial aid. We'll review the application process. I want you to have a general idea of how financial aid decisions are made by the colleges and universities. Towards the end, we'll touch upon how families, put it together and make a plan to pay. We're not going to get too deep in the weeds on loan options, things like that, because you're not ready to pay the bill yet. For most of you, I'm imagining most of you have seniors. So we have lots of other programs in the spring. So when you get emails from us, we'll invite you to those webinars as well, where we can review award letters and talk about how to pay the bill and all of those good things. And at the end, I'll also give you some free resources that are available for you. All right, so let's talk about the types and sources of aid. So I apologize in advance. I'm getting over a cold, so my voice might sound a little scratchy. But financial aid is money to help students pay for college. So it's not just free money. A lot of people think of grants and scholarships as financial aid, which is true. And those are free monies that you do not have to pay back. However, financial aid is also considered in the form of the federal work-study program, which is a part-time job that the student would get on campus. This work-study money, the students would earn a paycheck every couple of weeks, and it's to help pay for some of those unbilled expenses like books and supplies that are part of the cost of attendance, transportation, things like that. So the nice thing about work study versus just a regular part-time job on campus is that it is a federal program. So the monies that the student earns are not reported the following year as income. So it's taken out of the formula for financial aid, which is nice. And families do have to qualify. It's a need-based program. There's also federal direct student loans, which are considered financial aid. So federal direct student loans, and I have a slide on that, so I'll talk about that in more detail. They are considered financial aid because it's really the only way an 18-year-old who's maybe not established credit, probably isn't working full-time, can take out a loan up to $27,000 over the 4 years without, a cosigner or credit. So it is a great way for students to help contribute towards the bill, to take on some of the responsibility of paying the bill, in addition to the grants and scholarships that they may receive. Now, you notice it says federal student loans. So there are federal loans for parents. There's also private loans like loans through MEFA, and those are not considered financial aid. So I just want to clarify, when we talk about loans being financial aid, it is for student loans. So let's talk about some of the sources of financial aid. So financial aid can come from lots of different sources. And when you get your financial aid award, after the student has been accepted to college, and they'll get a financial aid award as well. And that will include any federal programs that your family might be awarded or eligible for. So grants, the work study program, the loans, the federal student loans, those will be included, as well as any aid from the state of Massachusetts that they might be eligible for. In addition, your award letter will also have any grants or scholarships that the college has awarded the student. Now, that does include merit aid, which we'll talk about. So merit aid would come from the admissions office, and that would be included on a financial aid award as well. So anything from the school is going to be on there. Other sources of financial aid would be scholarships through your local community. So the local high school that your student attends, you definitely want to make sure that the student is applying for those scholarships locally. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. There's also search engines like MEFA Pathway, which is a college and career planning tool that MEFA offers. It's free of charge, as well as FastWeb. So those are national search engines that students can use to search for scholarships, in addition to the ones in the local community and state, federal, and college aid. So federal direct student loans, let's talk about those for a minute. We usually get a lot of questions about these. So with this loan program, the student is a sole borrower, so they don't need a cosigner, which is great. There's no credit check. If your family qualifies and has financial need, part of the loan could be subsidized, meaning the loan is interest-free while the student is in school. If you don't qualify for the subsidy, then the entire loan would be unsubsidized. And even those who do qualify, it wouldn't be the entire loan that's subsidized, it's a portion of it. So if we look at the freshman year loan amount, for an example, $5,500 is the max. You can see it in the blue box that a student can get as a freshman. So if your family qualifies, then up to $3,500 of that $5,500 could be subsidized, meaning interest-free while they're in school. The remainder of it, or for some families, the entire $5,500 would be unsubsidized, meaning interest is going to accrue on those loans and will have to be paid back at the time of repayment. So you probably heard a lot in the news about the interest subsidy, or the waiving of interest and payments during the pandemic. Students that are in repayment on those loans will start paying those back. Everybody has to start paying their loans back in January, so they're going to lift that interest-free and forbearance for students. So this is one of the benefits of a federal student loan. The interest rate is fixed for the life of the loan. So for students who are in college right now and borrowed this year, their interest rate is 3.73% fixed. That changes every July 1st. So students who are entering school next year, we'll find out usually in May. Every July 1st, it changes what the new rate will be. So that rate will be fixed for that particular loan for the life of that loan. And then each year, the student might borrow an additional loan that might be fixed at a different rate. So they might have 4 different loans with 4 fixed interest rates. But the nice thing is it is fixed, so the rate won't change. The rate did go up last year, unfortunately, to 3.73%. Now, no payments are due on this loan while the student's in school. They can defer payments for graduate school as well, and other things like the military, Peace Corps, things like that. So there's a lot of flexibility with this loan, which is another benefit. There's multiple repayment options that are on studentaid.gov that you can check out. And when the student graduates, their financial aid office will have them go through an exit interview so they understand their repayment. The maximum amount that a student can borrow as an undergraduate is $27,000. So after they graduate, if they go into grad school, I believe it's $20,500 per year instead of $7,500 senior year, for example. And then medical and dental students, they can also borrow much more than that. So the amounts they can borrow do go up for grad school and post-secondary, medical school, for example. But unfortunately for those programs, there's not a lot of need-based financial aid. So the government lets you borrow more, but there's a lot less, scholarships and grants. So the estimated repayment of this $27,000 loan is about $300 a month for the standard 10-year repayment. But if you add in the interest that could accrue, it's more likely they'll be paying back $32,000 to $34,000. Now that's with the standard 10-year loan. So you do want to, when the student graduates, look at the repayment options and, choose an option that they can afford. But reminder that the further you push out repayments, the longer the repayment term, this 32 to 34,000, it'll be on the higher end. So but they can defer it, so that makes it nice and easy while they're in school to be able to, help contribute, help mom and dad towards the bill. So let's talk about the different types of aid. It could be awarded for the student's merit and or the family's financial need. So let's talk about merit-based aid first. So merit-based aid is awarded to the student in a recognition of a talent or skill. Most merit aid that's given, particularly from the colleges and universities, is going to be based on the student's overall admissions application. Sometimes it could be athletic, artistic, musical talents, things like that. You'll usually find out if the student qualified for merit aid at a college when you get your admissions letter. So the letter, it could be online, will say, congratulations, you've been accepted, and we're going to give you $40,000, $10,000 a year for 4 years. I'm just making up that 40,000 number. It could be more or less. It depends on the school and the student. Not every school gives merit aid, and not every student is going to get merit aid at every college they apply to. It really depends on the college's enrollment goals and the students that are applying that year, who they're going to award their merit aid to. Now, there are typically requirements of this merit aid that are, higher standard than the need-based aid we're going to talk about. So the student usually needs to get a minimum GPA. It could be 2.8, 3.0, 3.5. It really depends on the school and the program and the aid that the student's awarded. It could also be tied to a major or a program. So if the student is applying to the engineering program and they get a scholarship from the engineering department, and then the student decides sophomore year, I want to be a teacher and not an engineer, you just want to know ahead of time, will I still be able to keep this merit-based scholarship? And if it's something to do with grades, so the student doesn't meet the GPA, or doesn't meet the standards in terms of that scholarship, you'll want to know what happens. Do we lose the scholarship altogether? Does the student have a semester to get their grades back up? Will they take away a portion of the scholarship? It's important for the student to know their responsibility for their merit-based aid, because that is another way that the student is contributing towards the bill. They've done a great job and they've gotten this aid, but you want to make sure that they understand it's their responsibility to keep that, because if they lose this scholarship the next semester or next year, there could be a big hole in the bill that you're going to have to come up with. So it's important to have that conversation. Sometimes there's a separate application that's required, but for the most part at the colleges, they're looking at the overall admissions application. Now, I mentioned that not every college offers merit-based aid. So some schools, like the Ivy League schools, for example, they don't give merit-based aid, MIT, because every student is meritorious that's applying to those schools. Most students are straight A students. So they give a lot of need-based aid, but there's a handful of schools across the country that do not give out merit-based aid. The applications for financial aid and for admissions could be as early as November 1st. Those who are applying early action or early decision, those deadlines are coming up November through December, maybe early January. So you want to make sure the student, if I'm talking to the seniors in the room, that they know what their deadlines are if they're applying early, because often the financial aid deadline is the same as the admissions deadline or a week or two later. So you don't want to miss any of these deadlines. Now, the other way to get financial aid, and this is where most financial aid is given out, is based on financial need. So the financial need based on the family's financial picture that you'll provide in some financial aid forms that I'm going to talk about. So the student in the family would qualify for this aid based on their financial need. It's a standardized formula, treats everybody the same. Grants from the federal government, the Pell Grant, for example, the federal student loan, especially that subsidy work study, things like that, those are based on financial need. Now, the criteria to maintain that financial need-based aid is a lower threshold as far as GPAs go. They just need a 2.0, but they do need to be enrolled, usually at least half time, and making satisfactory academic progress towards their degree. So you can't enroll in 4 or 5 classes one semester and then drop 3, go down to 2 classes and assume that you're going to keep your need-based financial aid, because there are minimum enrollment requirements to keep that. And for those who are just joining us, I just want to give a quick shout out, let you know that we are recording tonight's session, and I'll share the slides tomorrow along with the recording. If you have any questions, please type that in the Q&A and I'll answer those as we go, as well as at the end. So let's go over the timeline and the applications. I mentioned check the deadlines, create a spreadsheet, whatever organization system works for you. We do have an application manager on MEFA.org, so that could help you stay organized. It's important to know each school the student's applying to, what is the financial aid deadline and what is the admissions deadline. If the student is applying early action, early decision, then it's coming right up in October or November. So the deadlines for regular decision are usually in February, March, sometimes January. But the biggest point here is to know what the deadlines are at each school for admissions and financial aid, and don't submit anything late. The FAFSA form is a form that everybody that's applying for financial aid is going to need to fill out. Every school in the country is going to require this to consider you for federal and state financial aid. Many colleges also use the information on the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. Notice I want to underline free because it is a free form. So they may use the information on this form to determine any institutional aid they may give out as well. Typically, your public colleges that don't have as much institutional aid, but the cost is lower, are going to use the information on the FAFSA to give out their own grants and scholarships. So you're not going to fill out this form until after October 1st of the student's senior year. So seniors on the line, senior parents on the line, you can start filling this out. You can also use the FSA My Student Aid mobile app. It makes it easier for the students to fill out their FAFSA, but you can also, keep track of your federal student loans on that app. You will need an FSA ID. So it's basically your email address and a password that you create on fsaid.ed.gov. So that's the website you'll go to. And that ID, the student's going to need one for their own self, and the parents will need one for them. Only one of the parents needs an FSA ID, but the student also will need one because it's your way of electronically signing that FAFSA form. Students will also use this for signing their master promissory note for their direct student loan. So moms and dads on the line, whoever's getting the FSA ID, if you have multiple kids, you only need to get one FSA ID as a parent, and you can use that on each FAFSA for each child as long as they're going to college, and then the student will get their own. The nice thing about this FAFSA form is there's a great tool called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, which pulls in information from your federal tax returns so that there's no mistakes, there's no adding extra zeros, making a mistake, there's no empty spots on the form. It really does help quicken up the process and make filling out the form a little bit easier. We do have a webinar on our website, on our YouTube channel, on how to fill out the FAFSA. And I'll mention some other resources to get help for filling out the form if you have a question here or there as well. Now, this FAFSA form needs to be filled out every year for each student. So if you have 2 kids that are going to be in college, you'll need to fill out a separate FAFSA for each student. So what's going to be on this form? What's going to be on the FAFSA? Students and parents' citizenship status is going to be on there. For parents who are not citizens, you can just put zeros in for the Social Security number if you don't have a Social Security number. Citizens or permanent residents, I should say. Now, it's okay if you can't get an FSA ID because you don't have a Social Security number. You can always sign that FAFSA form, print it out with a wet signature and mail it in. Quicker and easier to use the FSA ID though. and to submit it electronically. You're going to want to list all the colleges the student is applying to. You have to have at least one college on that FAFSA to submit it. So I talked to a parent today. What if the student applies to more colleges? After we submit the FAFSA, you can go in and add additional schools. So you can add up to 10 for the first submission. After the submission goes through, you can then take some off and add new schools on. Parents' information is going to be on here. So for FAFSA purposes, who is the parent? It's going to be the parents who are married, including same-sex parents. Even if they're not married, if parents are living together, both parents are going to be on that FAFSA form. If parents are divorced or separated, doesn't have to be a legal separation, they're just not living together and they're separated, then it would be the custodial parent who fills out the form. And if the custodial parent is remarried, it would be the custodial parent and the step parent's information on the FAFSA. So if parents are divorced, just the custodial parent will fill out the form. And the non-custodial parent's information will not be on this form. On the next form I talk about, they will want that. So legal guardians are not considered parents as for terms for the FAFSA form. Students who don't have parents or don't have access to their parents for lots of God forbid horrible reasons, incarceration, or parents have passed away, things like that, they would be applying independent without parents on the form. So there's questions that you fill out as you go, and if students answer yes to certain questions, then they don't require the parent information. So the number of dependents in the household, as well as the number of children in college, will also be on this form. All the parent and student financial, or a lot of the financial information is going to be required as well, both untaxed and taxed income. So for parents of high school seniors whose students are going to college for the first time in fall of 2022, you're going to be reporting your 2020 income. So the FAFSA is always going to be asking the prior year. So not 2021, because you haven't done those taxes yet, but it's going to be for 2020. So hopefully you have those taxes done, and this should be make it a lot easier. Parent and student assets are also included: savings, checkings, investments, equity in properties other than your primary household. So if you have a rental property or vacation home, the equity in that would be reported. 529s, if the parent owns that 529, it's reported as a parent asset. And assets and income are treated much more favorably in the parent name than in the students. They're looking for a bigger chunk of the students' income and assets. You do not include the equity of your primary home. You're not going to include retirement on here, life insurance, or the assets and value of the small family business. Now, what's considered a small family business? Less than 100 employees is considered a small family business for FAFSA purposes. So you obviously report your income for the business, but not the assets. So the physical property, equipment, whatever it might be, is not reported. Debt is also not reported on the FAFSA. So a lot of times a common question I get is, what if I have my own federal student loans? Can I report that? And on the FAFSA, they do not ask that question. Now, many of the students will be applying to private colleges as well. And there's a lot of them that require this form called a CSS Profile. So CSS Profile.org will have a list of all the schools that require this form. So again, I mentioned not every school is going to require it, but the schools that are requiring this form are going to be your bigger, usually private. There's a couple of really huge public colleges. I think UNC is one of them that might use the the profile, but it's going to be your bigger, private schools like BU, BC, Northeastern, Harvard, places like that. they're going to be requesting the profile. Now, this form is going to ask for a lot more information, and there is a fee for this. So it's $25 for the registration fee and to send the information to one school. If you have more than one school that requires this form, it's going to be $16 for each additional school that you're going to be filling it out. So basically, you put in the schools the student's applying to when you register, you pay your fee, and then it gives you a customized form based on the questions that those schools want asked. So 80% of the questions are going to be the same from school to school. And then there might be, a couple from Stonehill and a couple questions from Wellesley College, for example, that they might want to ask. So each form, you don't have to fill it out separate times for each school. You just have to fill out each form once and list the schools you want the information sent to. This form is also available after October 1st, so the parents, the students' senior year. So for families who make less than 100,000 or less, there may be fee waivers so that you won't have to pay those fees for registration. Because non-custodial parents also have to submit a profile. So what will happen is a custodial parent, the one who's filling out the FAFSA, they will fill out the profile and have a non-custodial profile form emailed to the non-custodial parent, and they will have to put in their own information. It's secure. Neither parent can see each other's information, and you only have to pay the fee on the custodial form, not the non-custodial profile. So they're connected through the student Social Security number. We do have a great webinar in filling out this form as well on our YouTube channel. Now, some colleges are going to, everybody's requesting the profile, but some colleges may have their own institutional financial aid form for their own institutional aid instead of having you fill out the profile. So basically, you'll want to find out from each school, what are the deadlines and what forms do we need to fill out? Everybody's going to have to fill out the FAFSA. So after you submit the forms, the colleges and the state of Massachusetts, I'm assuming everybody on the line is a Mass resident, will receive this information electronically from the feds and from the College Board for the profile. Once the FAFSA form is submitted and processed, it'll be a couple of days after you submit it, you'll get a student aid report or a SAR by email, usually by email. And when you get that student aid report, you'll obviously want to review it, make sure everything was accurate. But it's also your indication that if you want to add more than 10 schools, you can then go in, take a school or two off and add those additional colleges. But you do want to make sure that the form has been processed. Once you get that SAR, that's your key that the FAFSA has gone through. You'll want to contact the financial aid office with any special circumstances. So, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. A lot of people have lost jobs or lost income, overtime, things like that, have, unreimbursed medical expenses. God forbid, a lot has happened over the last year and a half. There could be, we just saw yesterday, past couple days, trees falling on houses. That's a special circumstance. That could be, a big expense that might not be reimbursed. So you want to let the financial aid office know about these type of circumstances so that they may be able to make adjustments on your financial aid applications. Now, colleges may request federal verification documents, and the financial aid application, I'll talk about verification in a second, is not complete until you've submitted these documents. So colleges will then review all the information once you've gotten all your documents in and you've filled out the forms, and then they will determine based on their criteria and what you're eligible for from the state and federal government, what your financial aid offer will be. So a little bit more on verification. Colleges may need to verify information for their own institutional aid or you may be selected by the Department of Education, and the college will then communicate with you on their behalf to get information from you. It could be tax return transcripts, business statements. They may have a worksheet that they want you to fill out, but you do have to report and submit this documentation, or your financial aid offer is not complete. So you may have received some grants and scholarships, but those aren't going to be applied to the bill until you've gone through this process. Now, you may not get verified or have to submit any additional documents at some of the colleges, or maybe if you're lucky, all of the colleges won't request this. So verification is not necessarily for every single person for every college. It's it's really hard to determine when this Department of Education flags you for verification. They don't necessarily say why they're doing it. So there's no real rule of thumb about who's going to get flagged for verification. But you do want to log in, make sure the student is reading their email, logging into the college's portal for communications. Everything's being sent to the student. It's their education, so that's where the colleges are communicating. And again, for those, if you have questions, just type those in the Q&A. So the financial aid office at the college can be very, very helpful. You don't want to shy away from asking questions or working with them closely. Asking for financial aid, inquiring about it is not a bad thing. They're not going to hold it against you. They can tell you lots of things about their financial aid, what their renewability criteria is, not just for the need-based aid at their school, but also maybe merit-based aid, as well as federal and state aid. You are going to have to report to the financial aid office that the student's attending any private scholarships that the student receives. Usually you find that out around graduation time or about a month before. So you'll want to let the college know of any outside scholarships, and they can also let you know how they're going to apply those outside scholarships to your financial aid award. Most schools will apply private scholarships to any gap or unmet need. They might reduce the student loan. It really depends on the school, but most schools will find a way to add those private scholarships and do the least harm to the student. 24-25 is going to be a big change. I'm not going to go through them today. In how financial aid is processed, there's going to be a lot of simplification on the forms and eligibility. So it is good to know, okay, in a couple of years, how are those changes going to affect my award? So one change is they will no longer be asking how many students are in college on the FAFSA. So will that affect your award? Financial aid office, you'll work with them about any appeals to the financial aid award, changes in family circumstances. So remember that you are applying in October of the student's senior year. By the time the student finds out all the schools they're been accepted to, then things may have changed. So you want to let the school know of any change. So I do have a question about FAFSA application that was processed, and they keep getting emails saying actions required. I would call FAFSA directly to find out what is going on with your FAFSA application. I'm not sure why that would happen if it was submitted properly. So you can contact them. And we have that number if you need it. So how do you get in touch with the financial aid office? Most schools are back in the buildings, at least in a hybrid situation, a few days a week. They might be rotating staff in and out and still working remotely to keep the number of people down in the office. So the best way is still right now during the pandemic. Email is a good way to get in touch with them, but you can also call. The nice thing about everybody being used to Zoom now is that, if the students, you want to talk to their financial aid officer at a school in California, you can set up a meeting. You don't have to be there in person. So they will do that as well. Lots of schools are doing lots of Zoom chats with families. So how do colleges, once you submit that documentation, how do they come up with your financial aid award? Let's talk about that. So the first thing they're going to do is look at the overall cost of attendance. So that's what I like to call the sticker price. It's not just the billed expenses, tuition fees and room and board. It's also going to be unbilled expenses that you're going to have to pay for. And the school does include these unbilled expenses like books, transportation, personal. They have a budget that they allocate for that. So the financial aid you receive is going to be based on the full cost of attendance. So in essence, the higher the school costs, the more eligibility you might have for financial aid. Then they will look at your EFC, which will be on your student aid report. So this is your expected family contribution, and that is a number based on your ability to absorb 1 year of college costs. So it's based on 1 year. So if you got your student aid report back and it said your EFC is 10,000, that's for 1 year. Now I'll go through an example of an award letter. The EFC is usually a starting point. Most families pay more than that EFC because virtually all the colleges across the country don't have the budgets to meet 100% of every family's need. So I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But the same federal formula is used for every family. And colleges will use, a lot of colleges will use the CSS profile information in their own institutional calculation to determine an institutional EFC formula, to determine their own institutional aid. And then they'll combine the federal and institutional together to calculate a financial aid award. But all of this is based on the premise that it's the family's primary responsibility to pay the bill. And financial aid is added and included and given to help with that cost. Now, right now, until 24, 25, if you have more than one child in college, then your EFC is going to be split among the number of students. So using the $10,000 EFC, you have 2 students in college, EFC is going to be $5,000 for one student and $5,000 for the other. There is an EFC calculator on MEFA.org that you can use for families on the line who have younger students, freshmen, sophomores, or juniors. You're dying to find out what your family contribution will be. You can go right on MEFA.org to check it out. So when they get those numbers, the college is going to take that cost of attendance. They'll deduct your family contribution because you always have to pay at least that. And whatever's left over is your eligibility for financial aid, your financial aid eligibility. And the college will then try to fill in that eligibility from all the different sources. So if we look at a college that costs $45,000, and the green barrel is the cost of attendance at this school, and the family's EFC is $5,000. So that goes in the barrel first, which we're trying to fill up the barrel, which is the $45,000. The next thing you'll see on a financial aid award is going to be grants and scholarships. So all the free money, all the good stuff that you might be eligible for. So that's going to come in. So we're halfway there. Then this federal student loan will be on there. Usually most schools will package the full $5,500. Then if the student's eligible for any work study, that will be on there. Work study is usually not deducted from the bill, but it is going to be on a financial aid award if you qualify, knowing that the student can get this part-time job and use that for those unbilled expenses. So the school did a pretty good job of trying to fill the barrel, but they weren't able to fill it up to the top. They weren't able to meet this family's full financial eligibility. So this family has to pay their EFC of $5,000, but also has to cover any unmet need or any gaps in the financial aid award. So in this example, family is going to have to pay $10,000. Now for families who, again, have younger students, you could use that EFC calculator, but I like to point families to net price calculators. I feel that they're a much more accurate tool because they are listed on every college's website. Every school is required to have this calculator by the federal government. So if you're looking at, let's say, a few private colleges, for example, a lot of the schools that have institutional aid or, significant, endowments, their calculators are much more sophisticated and take a lot more information into consideration so that they can give you a much more accurate number of what your estimated financial aid will be at that particular school based on their costs and the information you put into the calculator. It's all confidential. It's really just a planning tool to get estimates. They may even ask about the student's academics at GPAs and test scores to see if you might qualify for merit aid. So again, it's an estimate. It's not, set in stone. But if you're curious of what you're going to be looking to pay at a couple of schools students interested in, go ahead and fill one of these out, and it can give you a general idea. And if you have questions about your results, I recommend printing them out because there is no way to save it for the college to look at later. Again, these calculators are confidential. The school can't see who's filling it out and what they're getting for results. But if you do have questions about it, I recommend filling it out, and then you can talk to the financial aid office if you have questions about it. So financial aid offers can vary from school to school, student to student. So if we use our example of a family with the $5,000 EFC, these 3 colleges all cost $45,000, so we're keeping the cost the same. So the family has eligibility for $40,000 at each school. But not every award is going to look the same for lots of different reasons. So if we look at College A, there's no unmet need. Their need is being met 100%. We know that most colleges can't afford or don't have the budgets to meet 100% of the family's need. Schools like the Ivy Leagues, Boston College, Brandeis, schools like that, they have good endowments, so they may say up front, we meet 100% of need. Northeastern, for example, is another school that does that. So you should have a 0 at the bottom for all of those schools. But most schools can't meet the unmet needs, so there's going to be gaps. So you can see that at each of these schools, because they cost the same, the student is eligible for the same federal student loan and the work study. But the grants and scholarships are different. And why are they different from school to school? Well, it could be that College A, maybe they're less selective than College C. Or maybe College B gave more than College C because they have a bigger budget. Or maybe they want the student a little bit more than maybe College C. It really depends. You can ask the schools how they're coming up with their numbers, but don't be surprised if you see unmet need or gaps in a financial aid award. That's pretty common. So this slide looks almost the same, but there's one big difference on these awards that I'm showing you. Same cost, same EFC, but you can see that some of the schools are replacing grants and scholarships with big fat parent loans. And it's not low cost parent loans like loans through MEFA, it's the Federal Plus loan, which has a rate of over 6.2%. So some colleges package in these credit-based federal parent loans to make that line at the bottom, that unmet need, to make that number look smaller. So it looks like each school has 5,000 in unmet need, but really the only college that has 5,000 unmet need is College A, because they didn't package a plus loan. College B, if you look at the numbers, just take that plus loan off the award, just cross it out, add that to your balance due, and that's really the number you're looking at. Then once you know what you're going to pay, you can figure out how you want to pay the bill. And it could be the plus loan that they put in the award. It could be a loan through MEFA or cash or 529s or a combination of everything. It really depends on the family and how you want to do it. But just want you to know that if you see a plus loan on an award, it's not financial aid. Now, I don't know of a lot of schools who do this, but I have seen plenty of big plus loans, 30, 40,000 plus loans in financial aid awards from colleges who aren't giving the family much financial aid. Okay, so just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, to type those in the Q&A. Now let's talk about how families pay for this. How do they, come up with a strategy? So I mentioned loans, savings. It's not a one size fits all. So not every family is going to borrow it all. Most families haven't saved it all. Most people are putting a combination of resources together. So if we look at an example of $20,000 that's due at a college, you could take out a MEFA loan for $20,000 at $200 a month and the bill is paid. But we don't want you to do that if you can afford to use some savings or pay out of pocket in cash, maybe on a payment plan. Borrow less, use savings, use money out of pocket if you can. If you don't have the full 20,000 saved, you could also look at what's called an interest-free monthly payment plan. So that's this middle bar here. For a $20,000 balance, a 10-month payment plan, it's really just a budget plan that allows you to spread out part or all of the costs over 10 months interest-free. It's not a loan, it's just a budget plan that you pay monthly. If you did 20,000 on that 10-month plan, it'd be 2,000 a month. So maybe your family can't afford that 2,000 a month to put it all in the payment plan, but you can afford out of your monthly budget a lot more than that minimum loan payment of $200 for a $20,000 loan. So try and borrow less. In this example, students saved, they worked over the summer, maybe mom and dad have a 529 plan of 16,000 and they've decided we're going to do 4,000 a year over 4 years. So there's 5,000 right off the top, off the bill. Then they say, okay, I can afford about $600 a month out of pocket. So we're going to do $500 a month on a 10-month, $5,000 payment plan. So we still need to borrow, but we've cut our bill in half before we've borrowed. And then it will be on an education loan, maybe a family loan like through MEFA or that plus loan I mentioned for $10,000 at $100 a month. So there's your $600 affordable monthly payment. So it's never too early to start talking to students about the cost, what families can realistically come up with, what level of comfort mom and dad are with borrowing. If you have other students coming down the road, how are you going to make that work for all the students who are going to be going to college? For some families, students, if they really don't know what they want to do in college, they're not sure they want to go away right now, maybe because of the pandemic, community college might be a great way to start. You can get a lot of good credits that you can transfer to a 4-year school, public and private schools, and you can save a lot of money that way with the student commuting to school. So think in terms of a 4-year plan. So it's an annual process. You need to apply for financial aid each year, but think in terms of 4 years, especially if you are looking at borrowing as a family. Because if you have to borrow freshman year, you're most likely going to need to borrow years 2, 3, and 4 as well. So make sure, if we used our example before, if that $10,000 loan, that $100 a month, okay, we can afford that. But if you need to borrow $10,000 a year for 4 years, are you comfortable with doing that? And can you afford $400 a month at the end of 4 years of borrowing? Those are the questions you need to be asking and talking about with the student before they commit to a school. Also, if your family borrows a loan and are looking for the student to help pay them back when they graduate, and this is above and beyond the federal direct student loans, you do want to consider the student's post-graduation plans. Are they going to be able to help mom and dad pay back those parent loans based on, maybe they're going to graduate school, they won't be working, they won't be able to start making those payments right away. If they're going to be helping out, what are they looking at for a career? If they're looking at a career that's, very good paying job, then it might not be very difficult for them to help mom and dad pay back the family loans. But if they're going into, maybe a very rewarding, but, lower salaried job, then they might be struggling to pay their own loans back in addition to helping mom and dad. So those are the things you need to think about. Also, before the student commits to an undergraduate school, if they're planning to go to graduate school, they want to be a doctor or dentist, whatever it might be, you want to really consider how much they're borrowing as an undergraduate, because they're probably going to have to borrow most of the costs for graduate school because there's a lot less financial aid available for graduate school. Now, I mentioned borrowing, and we don't want families to borrow if they don't need to. We're always advising families to, be wise about the borrowing. but we know that most families are going to need to borrow in some way, shape, or form. So just keep in mind, above and beyond the federal direct student loan, where there's no credit check, if mom and dad are looking to co-sign a loan with the student, a MEFA loan, for example, a federal plus loan, they want to take on the borrowing themselves, those require good credit. So you want to know what your credit looks like before you're applying, because they are credit based. And with private loans, alternative loans like loans through MEFA, the rates are based on credit score as well. So the higher your score, the lower your interest rate. And if you're looking at different colleges, we can help with you comparing those financial aid offers, but you really want to look at that bottom line, not just what the cost of the school is, not just what they're giving you in financial aid, but the bottom line net cost at each school, and compare that number, because that's really the true cost of that school. So I have a quick question, I'll answer it now. How do we avoid those plus loans, or how do we know if they're included in the tuition calculation? So tuition is not calculated based on plus loans. Tuition is the number it is. They're going to charge you the same amount no matter what you're eligible for in aid. Those federal parent plus loans, some colleges put that on a financial aid award to make your award look better. But really, that plus loan on a financial aid award is just a recommendation of how you might pay the bill. So you'll see it on a financial aid award, it will show plus loan. So it's not part of the calculation of financial aid. It's not part of how they calculate your cost. It's just a line item that you might see on a financial aid award to, it's kind of a little deceptive, if I'm being honest, that makes the financial aid award look a lot better, even though it's really not financial aid. So it's not part of the tuition calculation. So good question. All right, let's keep moving. So I'm getting these hours just go by so fast. It's already almost 8 o'clock. So I'll keep going and then we'll answer some more questions. We're almost done. So there are some great cost saving options that you should look into. Public colleges in Massachusetts are great. They're all over the state. You can start a community college, transfer to a 4-year school to save a bundle, get some tuition and credits under your belt. There's a lot of private colleges that work with their local community college with great transfer options as well. They may provide transfer credits and tuition credits, things like that. So check out mass.edu/mass transfer to learn more about that. Tuition Break through New England Board of Higher Education also has different programs available at out-of-state public colleges if you live here in Massachusetts. So for example, there might be a program, a specialized program that none of the public colleges in Massachusetts offer, and maybe a public college in Maine has that program. So you might get a tuition break because you're going to Maine for that program. So look at all those types of options. And we often do blogs and emails about some of these great resources. So you'll be signed up for that just by registering for tonight's webinar. FAFSA Day for high school seniors and their parents is going on October through February. It's one night a month. It's all virtual right now, both English and Spanish. And it's basically free online assistance. It'll be basically a Zoom like we're doing now, and you show up and the host will put you in a private room with somebody, a financial aid professional, who will assist you with filling out the form. So it's all very secure and private, but it is a great free resource if you need help. Mass EdCo has educational opportunity centers in different locations across the state if you want to go in person. You can also, obviously, I'll give you MEFA's number and email at the end. Always call us if you have a question. So here's the timeline. Again, I'm going to send you these slides tomorrow, so I won't read every bullet. But if we're looking at, senior year, it's really important to know what students the student's applying to, what schools are applying to. Make sure you're meeting those deadlines. You have it all organized. In the winter for early action, early decision, and spring for regular admission, you'll start getting your admission offers and financial aid offers. MEFA will be offering after the college acceptance webinars in March and through the spring, through April, where we can help you compare award letters. So, you know, I don't want to scare you about those plus loans that might be on an award, but we can point those out for you and help you figure that out and help you create a strategy to pay the bill. So that's all going to be available in the spring. Attend open house programs, start visiting schools. If you have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, you know, check out a city over a weekend, maybe stay overnight, have some fun with it, and check out some schools in the local area. You know, go to a basketball game at a local school, go to a play at a college in the area, just to get on campus so the students can start seeing different types of campuses. May 1st is a national decision deadline where everybody has to commit to a school. So that is going to be coming up soon for high school seniors. So what can you do now? You can get your FSA ID. So the student needs one, the parent needs one. Make sure you're researching those deadlines. We have more webinars coming up. It's on our YouTube channel. The recorded webinars are there. Also on MEFA.org, if you look at events, those are there. So you can sign up for additional webinars coming up. We have tons of great blogs on MEFA.org. The timeline I just mentioned, the college application manager, there's a ton of stuff on there. So please, you know, go on our website, check it out, you know, get some help. Here are all of our social media channels. Follow us everywhere. Link in with us everywhere. Facebook, or I think Facebook, I just read, changed their name today. So we might have to update this slide, but Twitter, we're always putting out Twitter alerts on new scholarships that we come across, things like that. Our YouTube channel has all of our recorded webinars, and we just got started on Instagram. So connect with us there. So this is my key to have you send in Q&As right now in the Q&A, and I'll read those out. So while everybody is typing in their questions, I want to give you our phone number, which is right here, our email address, collegeplanning@mefa.org. Call us or email us if you need assistance. Okay, so Father Sam, did you have any other? I have a couple questions.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. It's a great presentation. 1 second, please.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's Father Samuel. Thank you for everything.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions if that's okay with you. We have a couple.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Any questions?
I have two. Yep. But feel free if anybody has any others to type them in. So I'll answer them live for everybody. Is there assistance for filling out the CSS profile form? Yes, you can call the CSS profile. We have that recorded webinar I mentioned on how to fill out the CSS profile. That's right on our website, right on our YouTube channel. If you're filling it out and you have a question, our phone number is right here, our email's right here. You can get in touch with MEFA as well, and we can assist you there too. So feel free to get in touch. How can we submit or retake the SAT or ACT scores after applying to colleges? So basically, if you apply to a school and then retake the scores, you can have the SAT or ACT send those scores to the college. So that should be pretty easy to do even after you've applied to send them the updated scores. Okay, let's see. I have another question here. Let me read this here. So this question, I'm not sure about the answer. You might want to check in with a college, but it's asking, you know, about a family who immigrated here when the student was young. And if she's considered a second language English speaker, does she have to take the TOEFL test? TOEFL, just for those of you who are wondering. And usually if she has a very good command of English, you don't have to take that test. It's usually, you know, students who are new immigrants who just came here and are just starting to understand or learn the English language that would have to take that test. But you can check with one of the colleges the student's applying to, but typically it's just for students who not only is English their second language, but they're not a strong English speaker. Because schools want to make sure before they put them into a program, if it's all English speaking, that they have a good command of English. So if that's the case, then they usually don't have to take TOEFL. But it's a good question to ask each of the schools the student's applying to. Okay, I don't see any other questions.
We're good here too. We will give them the summary in Arabic at a later time, but we'll also rely on your recording and the slides, Stephanie. But we want to thank you so very much for taking the time, and I hope you recover from the cold totally. And may God protect you and keep you always safe, you and the whole team at MEFA. We're very happy to have this alliance with you, and we always wait for you from year to year. So it's a great partnership, Stephanie.
Thank you.
On your behalf, I would like to thank the team at MEFA, and if we can stand and pray together. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Through Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. May the love of God the Father, the grace of the only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, communion and fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Go in peace, and peace be with you. Thanks so much, Stephanie. Have a great night.
Peace be with you. Thank you, Father Sam.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. I have one question that I am going to answer before we go. If you have questions about the FAFSA form, I think we'd want to speak to you individually. So feel free to give us a call. We have one question about action required. So give us a call tomorrow and we can speak to you in a little bit more detail about that email you got from FAFSA. And
Sounds good. Perfect. Perfect.
All right.
You.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.